Good morning and good afternoon for everybody who are joining us in today's webinar that we at the EU SME Centre, together with our partner China Britain Business Council, are hosting on the healthcare markets report launch. Very happy to be having, of course, also our speakers for today's session. Let me first introduce myself. I'm Liam Jia, the Operations Manager of the EU SME Centre. And please, can we have the presentation projected on the screen? Sorry, Jack, I think it should be the other one from CBBC.
Oh, so sorry.
In the meantime, allow me to give a little bit of introduction to the background of today's session. As possibly all the participants you are already aware of, at the EU SME Centre, together with the China Britain Business Council, we have recently developed a report on the healthcare markets in China. A bit about today's topic. In 2019, China's healthcare import and export volumes both saw an increase from the previous year, reaching the highest levels since over almost a decade. In Europe, Asia, North America were China's top 3 continental partners for healthcare foreign trade. Developing healthcare reform in China continued to unleash new market opportunities, while international registrations and certifications acquired by Chinese companies were also on the rise. And since last year, the global outbreak of COVID-19 has placed the healthcare life sciences industries also then under the spotlight. As a result of the pandemic, the public are now also paying more attention to topics such as early warning, prevention of infectious diseases, vaccination research, development, medical equipment, medical devices, as well as online medical services. That's why earlier this year, the EU SME Centre, we identified the healthcare market as one of the topics that we would like to zoom in. And we have developed together with the China Britain Business Council this healthcare reports, healthcare markets reports that we are today going to run you quickly through. The report is available for downloading at the website of the EU SME Centre. Without further ado, please allow me to move to the agenda and introduce you to today's speakers. We have a good lineup of speakers, starting with my colleagues at the China Britain Business Council, Ms. Wendy Wang, who is the Director for Healthcare Life Sciences Sector at CBBC. Also, Chen, who is a Project Manager at CBBC, who will present us very briefly on the main findings of the reports. Later, we will also have our 2 speakers from CISEMA, Mr. Marcus Hupke and Mr. Jackie Lee, who will share with us updates on the medical devices regulations from their experts' point of view. Later on, we'll also followed by a Q&A session. Please, can we move to the next slide? About the EU SME Centre, who we are. We are a EU-funded project who has already started since a decade ago, focusing on supporting the exports of European small and medium-sized enterprises, getting them ready to do business in China. You can find the project website on the screen. Currently, we're in our 3rd phase. The projects will run until end of March 2022, after which will be followed by another phase. And this phase currently is run by a consortium of 5 partners, which you could see from this slide, the bottom of the slide. We are also an official member of EEN Network, Enterprise European Network, which is another project from the European Commission. And we have local offices here in Beijing, as well as back in Brussels. Next slide, please. Yes. About our main services that mainly falls under these four aspects. We have a knowledge center. We have published nearly 200 comprehensive market reports, guidelines, and case studies. And we have also an advice center where we provide in-house expertise on inquiries that SMEs could file through the project website. We also have a training center. We have conducted previously a number of face-to-face trainings. And since the COVID times, we moved most of our trainings also now to online. Last but not least, we also focus on constantly voicing on behalf of European businesses in China. We have a SME advocacy platform that we work constantly on improving the general business environment for European business in China. Next slide, please. And on this slide, you will be able to find the upcoming webinars and workshops, the upcoming activities of the SME Centre. Our focuses are not only on the healthcare sector, but also tomorrow we are going to launch another report of ours focusing on pet food. And there are also other focuses of ours that is going to be presented in the upcoming activities. And again, if you're interested in today's topic, we recommend you to go to the website and download this market report in full. Again, here you can find the advice center services that we provide on a free of charge basis for all European SMEs, the expert services on the website, as well as a self-diagnosis tool and an FAQ database that we have recently developed and updated. I think I have already taken too much time introducing the topic and speakers, so without further ado, next slide, please. I would already like to introduce our speakers, of course, very importantly, throughout the presentations. If you have any questions, please text them in the chat box or in the Q&A part. And we'll be collecting all information and address all the questions to our speakers later on. Our first speaker, Ms. Wendy Wang. Ms. Wendy Wang has been leading on the sector-related activities across China, working closely with UK healthcare, life science, government departments, trade associations, and has delivered over the years research reports, been working on marketing events with missions, as well as sector-themed expos, and also with the SME Centre. Wendy is a key expert for healthcare, pharma, and medical devices. Without further ado, Wendy, please take over and start your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Liam, for your introduction. I'm Wendy Wang, the Director of Healthcare Life Science Sector in CPBC. Just a quick introduction of the report. We are very happy to launch the report today together with our partner member company, CASMA. The report provides a high-level overview of healthcare market in China. It covers key factors and drivers that are shaping the market in China and general information of China healthcare providers, up-to-date information of market regulations, key players, and market entry inquiries. more importantly, opportunities and challenges that EU SME may facing in the future. As I said, the report is a very high-level overview of healthcare market in China. Next, I would like to hand over the floor to my teammate, Chen, who contributed the best effort in the report writing. Next, Corey, please. Thank you.
Good day, everyone. It is Chen from China Britain Business Council. So here I will give you a brief introduction to this report and explain how it is structured. Hope this will help you understand the report better. So there are 6 chapters in this report, and next I will brief the content of each of the chapter for you. So Chapter 1 is a sector overview. There are 3 sections: government support, demographic change, and a future outlook. So in the government support sections, you will find the figures regarding the China's healthcare spending and some policy support from the Healthy China 2030, and also the 14 5-year plan. And in the demographic change section, you have the latest data of the population in China. For example, the population structured by age and the number of people aged 60 and above. So in the future outlook section, we conclude some information from the 4 policy listed in the slides issued by the Chinese government to give you an outlook of what kinds of measures that the Chinese government will take to structure the healthcare sector. So the next chapter is an overview of healthcare providers in China. We apply a lot of figures, which is about the situation of healthcare resources, healthcare services, grassroots healthcare services, and also the traditional Chinese medicine services. So for example, in the healthcare resources, you will find the number of different types of medical institutions and beds provided in each institution type, and also the number of professional health personnel in China. And in chapter 3, this is an overview of 3 subsectors: the pharmaceutical sector, medical device sector, and also health service providers sectors. And for the healthcare service provider sectors, we also break it into 5 sectors to make an analysis, including private healthcare institutions, healthcare IT, rehabilitation services, and also elderly care providers, and also the fitness and medical obstetrics. Yes. And for each sector, we have.
Corey, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Could you please share your screen differently with a full screen view?
Oh, okay, sure.
I think our participants cannot view your slides clearly.
Oh, okay, sure. Hold on for a second. Oh, sorry, I cannot.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. So I think we are at chapter 3. So chapter 3 is an overview of the. Yeah, I will start it again for this part. So it's an overview of 3 subsectors, like the pharmaceutical one, medical device one, and also the healthcare services provider one. And for healthcare service provider sectors, we also break it into like the 5 sectors to make an analysis, as you can see from the slides. The private healthcare institutions, healthcare IT, and rehabilitation service providers, healthcare providers, also the fittest and medical aspects. For each sector, we have included in the market information, the regulatory policies, key players in China. And in the pharmaceutical sections, we also include in the major authorities governing the healthcare sector, as you may find it in the report. So the next part is the chapter 4. Based on the observation of EU SME Centre, we summarize the opportunities and challenges for SMEs. So for the opportunities, the pharmaceutical sector, the Chinese government encourages the importing of foreign drugs. So for example, in certain free trade zones, such as Beijing, some OTC drugs are allowed to be sold online via cross-border e-commerce. And in 2017, the NMPA issued a decision concerning the adjustment of imported drug registration to encourage the marketing of new drugs to meet the clinic demands. So, and for the medical device sector, the Chinese government will grant priority and facilitate the registration of innovative medical device and the device designed to treat rare disease and some frequently occurring disease that have no effective treatment right now. So such medical devices include the IVD equipment, the surgical robots, and also the high-end medical imaging equipment, and also others. And for the healthcare service provider sector, with the Chinese private healthcare sector further opening up, more opportunities can be identified for EU SMEs. So for example, the Hainan Boao International Medical Tourism Pilot Zone, it aims to become a key national hub for the medical tourism industries. Various policies issued in this area highlight a series of priority sectors, like including the high-end physical examinations, health management, third-party medical agencies, medical tourism and consultation platforms, and also other medical services sectors. So for the challenges, there are 4 main challenges for SMEs based on our observations: the pricing pressure due to the 2-invoice policy and the centralized procurement, and the stricter requirement against the unfair competitions, and the local competition due to that the Chinese government aims to encourage the development in this sector, and also the IP issues. Now, if you would like to know more about these challenges, you can raise your questions in the Q&A section later. Yeah, or you can find more explanations in the report. So apart from the analysis of opportunities and challenges, we also include 2 case studies for you to better understand the situation in the report. And chapter 5 is the key success factor for SMEs that we conclude based on our experience. They are like stay up to date with the latest policies, be innovative and cautious, and identify and work with reliable partners, and hire an effective agency to help you if you are new to the market, and also seek opportunities in the niche markets. You can find more explanation in the report. And chapter 6 is some useful information provided for you to review, which includes the key trade fairs in China, industry association in China, and also some useful websites. You can refer to the links provided in the report. And yeah, that's the main content of this report. Thanks for listening and hope you enjoy reading the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just ran us through very quickly the outline of the reports. Moving forward, please can we have back the slides? I would like to present to you our next speakers, Mr. Marcus Groepke, business consultant from CISEMA. Mr. Groepke has over 25 years experience in the medical device and life science sector. His deep experience in successful global medical devices launches at various manufacturers includes registration, market launch of multiple medical devices in various countries around the world. Mr. Groepke has a Six Sigma Green Belt certification. Mr. Groepke is a German native currently residing in Munich, in Germany. Marcus now supports European medical devices companies experience both a smooth and efficient registration in China, as well as our next speaker, also from CISEMA, Mr. Jack Lee. The next slide, please. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yes, Jackie is the marketing manager at CISEMA, who has completed his bachelor in Canada and worked previously in Bureau Veritas, that's specialized in testing, inspection, and certification. Jackie has also had the opportunity to work in Yahoo's digital tech team before joining CISEMA eventually in 2019. Jackie is currently the CISEMA's lead to support Hong Kong and China regulatory affairs for customers from Hong Kong and Taiwan. A very short introduction to both speakers, and now the floor is yours.
Thank you for the introduction, Liam. Please let me share my screen first. All right, hello everyone, I'm Jackie.
And I'm Marcus, and we will present on China NMPA registration of medical device, IVD, and medical software today. First, we would like to introduce CISEMA to you. CISEMA stands for China Service and Management, and we are a regulatory affairs consultant and clinical research organization for China. We were founded in 2002 in Munich, Germany, and Beijing in China by a former Siemens engineer. We now have 12 worldwide offices with nearly 100 employees, most of those on the ground in China. Please sign up to our monthly newsletter on China certification, which you can do on our website.
I'm Jackie, and I've been with CISEMA since 2019. As Liam has introduced, I'm currently situated in the CISEMA Hong Kong office, and I am the CISEMA lead to support the Hong Kong and China regulatory affairs for our customers from Taiwan and Hong Kong.
Yeah, and I'm Marcus, working in Munich in Europe, and I support manufacturers in Europe, mainly Germany, Switzerland, Austria, Scandinavia, and UK, Ireland, with their regulatory affairs in China.
So here is a brief overview about what we will talk about today. After first setting the scene with some broader figures about the digital health landscape in China and recent evolutions regarding the terminology, we'll examine the hot topics and latest changes of the regulatory framework for digital health products in China. So China's healthcare market as a whole has been growing rapidly in the last 10 years. And China's population is very digital, including apps for telemedicine, etc. And this digital sector is accelerating very fast. Deloitte reports that the China medical device market is expected to reach revenues of $120 billion in 2020 and is the second largest in the world. In the narrower subsector market of online medical services in China, this is expected to grow over 20 times by 2026, potentially reaching a market size of $28 billion. Digital healthcare growth has been a more recent story, with a report from Bain & Co this year showing huge increases in expectations of increase in digital service demands over the coming 5 years, with telemedicine showing the biggest increase, followed by long-term illness management, digital records, and self-diagnosis apps.
And in general, out of 1.4 billion Chinese people in 2027, about 340 million people will be above 60 years. This group will need more and more medical treatment, and due to the one-child regulation since the 1990s, these people are relatively wealthy and willing to invest in their health and well-being.
The digital health market in China has accelerated in response to the global pandemic and technological change. There are two interesting topic areas to dive into that are telehealth or distant medicine and digital therapeutics and use of AI. Regarding telehealth, it is only more recently that this process has accelerated with China's reimbursement system, now recognizing the internet-based medical expenses. This is controlled by the designation of healthcare institutions as internet hospitals. Because registration as an internet hospital is a prerequisite for providers to be able to offer online services, internet hospitals might be a supplementary service for a bricks and mortar hospital. For example, the Beijing #1 Army Hospital, internet hospital. Regarding digital therapeutics and use of AI, software products are increasingly being added to physical devices or in their standalone form to replace, support, or cross-check healthcare professionals. Digital therapeutics and AI medical products are a particular focus area from a top-down perspective in China.
A few brief key takeaways from us regarding future trends and opportunities in China's digital healthcare market. Chinese patients are more informed and demanding for medical information now. China's healthcare delivery systems are evolving over the past years and in future. New relationships and business opportunities between manufacturers and healthcare providers grow. And last but not least, China has a government-mandated directive to push AI tech and become a leading user and innovator of AI services by 2030. Let's talk about the NMPA, the National Medical Products Administration. It's a regulator in China directly responsible supervising medical devices, including medical software and IVDs. Previously, it was called China FDA or CFDA. In 2018, there was a broader governmental restructure and it was renamed, but this was not the first time it was renamed and restructured. Over the last 25 years, the healthcare regulatory body renamed multiple times and the responsibility scope has changed. Right hand of the slide show the current NMPA responsibility scope, which includes, as of today, medical devices and IVD, pharmaceuticals and cosmetics. Highlighted food, special nutrition related items in gray are managed by the SAMR, the State Administration of Market Regulation. In November 2018, the new official website of NMPA was activated. The website is in Chinese and all laws, regulations and guidelines are published only in Chinese. However, there is an English language version on the website with unfortunately very limited information. You can also access the NMPA database, where you can find registered certificates for imported medical devices, domestic medical devices, cosmetic, drugs, IVDs, etc., with basic information including intended use, country of origin, and manufacturer name. And once your product is registered, this information will also appear on the same database.
For the regulatory process itself, there have also been some recent digital developments that we would like to share. There is now an electronic submission system which supersedes the previous paper-based requirement. The so-called ERPS system is used for the electronic management of medical device registrations. This is beneficial for non-Chinese manufacturers because you don't need to post original documents to China. And last but not least, it is your NMPA legal agent's responsibility that information on the database is consistent. Some of you might have heard about the new State Council Order 739, seen as a game mover for the upcoming years. We are currently in the middle of another regulatory change in China, as a new top-level law governing medical devices and IVDs that came into effect on June 1st of 2021. It is called the Order 739. However, even though the new law is implemented, the practical effect at this stage is still limited, because it is up to the NMPA to interpret the law by issuing supporting regulations and guidelines. There are more than 8 such regulations and guidelines currently in draft that will fill out the new framework over the next few months.
A quick reminder on the hierarchy of laws set out on the left-hand side of the slide. Above all, there are around 20 very general laws. Below, there are around 100 implementation rules and regulations, which explain how to enforce the regulation. And finally, below these regulations, you can find around 500 detailed guidelines and standards which are product specific. The approval process of the regulation and guidelines follows in general these procedures. First, publication of a draft, in some cases publishing a trial version, then the publication of the final regulations. In some cases, there is a traditional period up to 1 year. In the end, the regulation takes full effect, but as you know, compared to other regions, the implementation will happen quite fast. So to our experience, 6 to 12 months.
Also set out is a short history of the top-level regulation for medical device supervision and administration. Prior to the year 2000, there was no safety law and medical devices that could be imported without restriction. Following Order 206 in 2000, an application form had to be submitted, but could be completed with relative ease. Then in 2014, with Order 650, there was a significant restructure and increase in supervision of medical devices. And this was further clarified in 2017 into the system that we know today. So what are the key takeaways for medical device and IVD manufacturers that are importing to China? There's the increased flexibility in the pre-market approval process, formalization of market authorization holder regime, increased focus on whole of life cycle supervision, and increased liabilities where laws are breached. Of course, what this means in practice still needs to be clarified, although NMPA has released over 8 draft regulations that's already being reviewed and commented. We don't have time to go into detail, but if you would like to know more, please get in touch with us. Importantly, manufacturers should watch this space closely because the practical effects to you are still in a state of flux.
Whilst there are still 8 chapters in the order with the same titles, 27 articles had been added and 70 articles modified. These additions were primarily in the bolded chapters in the slide, relating to registration and filing, distribution and usage, supervision, and legal responsibilities.
In a little more detail, most exciting perhaps for foreign manufacturers, there is a provision that local China type testing can now be self-tested by manufacturers rather than done in an NMPA certified lab. The draft regulation for self-testing proposes that the overseas manufacturer's lab will need to be accredited by their relevant government, but must follow the on-site verification guidelines on China QMS. There is an emphasis on innovation in the new order, with innovation devices eligible for quicker NMPA review time and allocation of a dedicated reviewer throughout the NMPA application. An innovative device is defined as a product with cutting-edge technology, significant clinical application, and its own China patent. Importantly, these devices don't need home country approval before applying to the NMPA for imported devices. Usually, home country approval is first required. There is now also the scope for a more considered risk-based approach to clinical evaluation. This would mean that clinical trials may not be needed even when there is no predicate. But where clinical trials are required, a hospital's capabilities to run them will now be a criteria for their ranking. This should greatly incentivize hospitals to increase their trial capacity and expertise. The general shift in the emphasis from point-in-time registration to whole of life cycle supervision has been formalized, including with the establishment of a system for professional inspectors. While inspection of domestic manufacturers is routine, overseas manufacturer inspections therefore may increase. The NMPA has recently published a report for the year 2020, providing some interesting statistics. Some of the numbers give you a sense of the market size and trends for medical devices, IVDs, including software as medical device. After the number of registrations stalled in 2017 and 2018 due to various changes to test requirements that were later resolved, the application and approval numbers have soared, nearly doubling from 2018 to 2020. In 2020, you can see that 9,849 medical devices, including IVDs, were registered in China out of a total of 10,579 applications. These numbers do not include class 1 and 2 domestic products because such applications are submitted to their respective provincial MPAs rather than the NMPA. 6,246 medical devices, including IVDs, were registered by importers in 2020, with the breakdown approximately 2/3 devices and 1/3 IVDs.
And we see some other trends and facts and figures in 2020. China continues to focus on the supply of high-end, high-cost medical devices from abroad. The top 5 class 2 and 3 product groups of foreign origin to be registered in China in 2020 were dental instruments, medical imaging equipment, passive implantable devices, neurological and cardiovascular surgical systems, and ophthalmic devices. The US was the number 1 importer to China, followed by Germany, Japan, Korea, and Switzerland. The composition of China's domestic medical production has shifted over the last 10 years from low-end consumables like disposable hospital supplies, first aid kits, surgical gloves, and band-aids to more technology-intensive products, including therapeutic and diagnostic devices. Despite this shift, according to a report by the State Health Planning Commission, currently, Chinese companies mostly occupy the middle and low price tier of medical devices, where the top tier is dominated by foreign brands, which are considered about 15 years ahead in the development. Let's go into the details of a registration, starting with the classification and risk class of a medical device. The classification in Europe can only serve as an indication for the risk class in China, as there is very often a different classification in China. Products are generally ranked higher than abroad. Only because a medical device is classified in class 2 in EU or in the United States, it is not necessarily classified as class 2 in China. Unfortunately, this is not straightforward in many cases. I myself had the experience in a customer project that his medical device classified as class 1 in the EU was classified as class 3 by the NMPA in China. Thus, registration was made impossible for the customer as it could not be commercially justified.
So how to classify a medical device? The classification catalog is vividly provided with many examples. If a device cannot be clearly classified, the rules for medical device classification apply. In borderline cases, there is the possibility of an official classification application to the National Medical Products Administration, the NMPA. The application must describe potential risks, specific features, and use of the device.
In December 2020, the NMPA announced a total of 28 total updates on the classification catalog, including 15 classification changes, to down classify from 2 to 1 and from 3 to 2, and 13 content updates for medical devices. In China, medical devices tend to be classified higher than in other countries. And the fact that NMPA down classified some products shows that the regulator realized that they were in the past too strict in some cases. Additionally, in November 2020, the NMPA released a draft document proposing the procedure which allows the dynamic amendment of medical device classification catalog. According to the draft, overseas manufacturers may submit for suggestions for the classification catalog to the Center for Medical Device Standardization Administration. This approach would provide a more risk-based and internationally recognized pathway for medical device classification. Helpfully, the NMPA has publicly released 2 batches of classification results in 2020, identifying whether products are class 1, 2, or 3, device parts or drug device combination devices. As shown on the bottom right of the slide, a total of 225 products are no longer classified as medical devices.
Medical device software includes software that is a medical device itself, that's also called as SAMD for short, or the software contained in medical device, SIMD for short. Software components refer to software that has one or more medical purposes, controls or drives medical device hardware, or runs on a medical computing platform. There are 3 aspects of software-specific considerations. First of all, we should consider the classification of a software. Secondly, it is necessary to consider the expected use scenarios, and core functions of software products so as to carry out corresponding risk management activities. Finally, we need to consider the security level of software products in the life cycle. In recent years, NMPA software audit is more and more standardized and rigorous. In particular, the test verification and validation in the software description file, as well as the review of software version and software update. In the description of software network security, the review of network security capability, network security update, maintenance and emergency response plan is particularly strict. For medical device software, there is a distinction between standalone or SAMD and embedded software or SIMD. These distinctions follow global harmonization guidance. SIMD has the same risk class as the corresponding hardware. The key difference is whether physical hardware is required to complete the intended use and whether a common computing platform is sufficient for the operation of the software, as shown on this slide. Here are some of the key categories of SAMD risk classifications, which we have translated from the Chinese classification catalog, including treatment planning software, image processing software, data processing software, decision support software, IVD software, and rehabilitation training software. The specific catalog section for software is 021. Although theoretically it's possible to have a class 1 SAMD, practically we haven't seen it yet.
And now let's have a look at the initial approval filing versus registration. Filing process for class 1 takes only approximately 2 to 4 months. For class 1 product, there is no expiration date for the certificate, nor no tests or trials are necessary in China, and it needs only a simplified test and CR report. A registration is mandatory for class 2 and 3 products. Best case scenario, roughly 18 months for the class 2 and 21 months for class 3 for the registration, and at least 1 year longer with clinical trials. Certificates for class 2 and 3 medical devices are valid for 5 years. There is for class 2 and 3 products a renewal certification. It is normally requested 6 months before the expiry date, but we remind our customers 2 years before in case technical standards have changed and tests are required. Full time frame for renewal from our experience is 1 year without and 1.5 years with type tests. If one is missing the deadline and does not hand in the renewal application to NMPA 6 months in advance, a new registration is required. There are two different approval changes. First is the extension with a one or more new product models, which will be included in the existing certificate. The scope of application, specification, and functionality of the added model is smaller or the same. And there's a product-specific change, an update on the characteristics of the approved product, for example, in technical specifications, intended applications, model name, and product structure. Then we have the administrative change, which takes around 6 weeks and refers to changes of name, address of the company or the legal agent, and the IFU change. Let's see the class 1 filing procedure in a glance. Class 1 products do not require local testing. It's a document-based process only. To our experience, the timeline is about 2 to 4 months. Documents must be submitted in person to the NMPA counter by your NMPA legal agent. And for our customers, one of our experts will usually walk the registration dossier to the NMPA counter for submission and return with a certificate on the same day.
For your reference on this slide is the filing certificate, so that you would recognize it if one day you apply for Class 1 medical device filing.
And here's the time frame and key milestones for the new registration of a risk class 2 and risk class 3 products. The total registration process takes 18 months for class 2 and 21 months for class 3 products in our experience.
Set out on this slide is a timetable with breakdown of the key steps. We will now look at these in more detail. An important reason for why the timeline is so long is the local testing requirement. Only biocompatibility testing done outside of China, following GLP, the good laboratory practice, which is the prerequisite to be accepted in China. All other testing must be done at certified labs within China prior to submitting your registration application. The timelines shown here assume no clinical trial is required. If it is, this can add a year or more to the timeline. Registrations are valid for 5 years. For software products, the relevant materials need for the application dossier for medical device software will have subtle differences. These documents that need to be prepared include but are not limited to product name and an introduction with structure and composition information, product research material, including a software description document, software version, and a listing certificate of the origin country, the PTR, clinical evaluation documents, and instructions for use. For testing requirements for the SAMD, some categories won't apply, such as biocompatibility, but testing will often be more rigorous due to the risk potentials. With test requirements according to standard like IEC 25051 of the 2014 standard, GBT 25000 standard.
An important part in the registration is a clinical pathway for your medical device. The default position is that all class 2 and 3 products must undergo clinical trials in China in order to support their NMPA application. One of our strengths as a regulatory consultant at CISEMA is helping our customers to avoid clinical trials. The first step is to look at the clinical trial exemption catalog, which is updated every year or so, most recently on 19th of January this year. If your product is listed on this exemption list, then a simplified clinical evaluation is sufficient.
If your medical device or IVD is not on the exemption list, then you may still avoid a clinical trial by comparing safety and efficacy of your device against a predicate. A predicate device is an equivalent device that already successfully gained the NMPA approval in China. If the predicate device is from a direct competitor gaining access to some of the information that is crucial for the CER, it will be difficult. This could be a hurdle unless you have a previous generation model in China. Since 2018, the NMPA allows applicants to utilize overseas clinical trial data, but to meet the requirements, there are a couple things to consider, including ethical, legal, and scientific principles of the NMPA. A multi-center clinical trial will be needed, and the key requirements are set out in the 2018 technical guideline. If your overseas clinical trial data qualifies, then this is an attractive clinical pathway.
The most recent additional pathway to avoid clinical trials is with real-world data, which was established in November 2020. Real-world data means data demonstrating function and use of the product in wide range of settings, such as routine healthcare records in the surveillance, administrative databases, personal devices, etc.
Although in trial version, the guideline has been implemented and so permits applications to draw on their real-world evidence generated in their home country or other markets to reduce China clinical trial case numbers, thereby decreasing time and cost of a China clinical trial where required, or to do away with local China trials altogether where the real-world evidence gathered from the data is sufficient. For manufacturers who would like clarity for their registration pathway, one service our customers find very, very useful is a feasibility study, which analyzes the data for your product and produces a report with recommendation about the most appropriate pathway for your product to take. Please email or call us if you would like to learn more. And if it is determined that clinical trials in China are required, then as a CRO, we will help our customers draft the trial protocol, select hospitals, and run clinical trials.
And this is what a final NMPA certificate looks like for class 2 and 3 products. On the right hand of the slide, we've set out the information that the certificate displays. Two important things are highlighted. Name of applicant should be the company or manufacturer, and the PTR, as a PTR is an important and indispensable part of the registration.
An interesting recent development is the issue by NMPA of electronic certificates instead of physical ones. This reduces some of the risk associated with holding the original. However, the appendix to the certificate, which contains the technical information and is known as the PTR, will not be issued electronically. Because the PTR is equally as important as the certificate itself, having an electronic version of the certificate itself does not add much.
All this registration needs to be done by a legal entity in China. This is known as an NMPA legal agent. The NMPA legal agent is the only official interface to NMPA, and at the end of the process, he receives the original documents and thus the authority to import the approved products. This is a very important strategic choice because of the ongoing effects it will have for your future activities in China. In December 2018, the NMPA released the Supervision and Management Task for NMPA legal agents for imported medical devices. But in August of this year, the requirements were clarified by the administrative measures for medical device, which came into force at the start of September, to establish quality management systems suitable for products and maintaining effective operation, formulate post-market research and risk control plans and ensure their effective implementation, perform adverse events monitoring and re-evaluation in conformity with legal provisions, establish and implement product traceability and recall systems, and finally, other obligations stipulated by the Drug Regulatory Department under the State Council.
Since the NMPA legal agent plays a crucial role in the approval process and beyond after-sales communication with the NMPA, he or she should be chosen very carefully. The key selection criteria are experienced in dealing with regulatory matters and related product standards, as well as with the relevant authorities. When choosing the NMPA legal agent, foreign manufacturers of medical devices have three choices: their own subsidiary, distributor, or consulting firm in China. For distributor, please be careful, because appointing the distributor as the NMPA legal agent can have unintended business consequences that are detrimental to the operational flexibility of the company. If the distributor also acts as the NMPA legal agent, he handles highly confidential product information. And to our experience, distributors are always looking to sales, but do not look back to PMS or historical files. If you choose a professional consulting company to be your NMPA legal agent, this service provider is actually a neutral solution and ensures independence for future decisions. The manufacturer owns the original document and thus protects its independence. Import, change, or renewal of registrations can be carried out independently of the trading partner in China. The freedom to change distributors or to select of any number of dealers in China is preserved. In all three cases, the local Chinese entity will act on behalf of the manufacturer and represent your company. If an NMPA legal agent does not cooperate anymore, there is a way of extracting his legal agent rights that requires the copies of the NMPA certificate and registration standard, or PTR, and can be done without the old agent support. For many years, Kazima has been supporting medical device manufacturers worldwide as an NMPA legal agent in all regulatory matters from registration to after sales in China. Kazima Beijing Consulting Limited operates as the NMPA legal agent within the Kazima Group. Our Beijing office combines experience, efficiency, performance, and commitment on behalf of our customers in China. By authorizing Kazima as a local legal representative, manufacturers gain the highest degree of independence from the dealers in China. So what needs to be reported? Only serious adverse events have to be reported. Medical device adverse events refer to various harmful events that have occurred in the normal use of approved medical devices that have caused or may cause human injury. On the other hand, serious injury includes life-threatening injury, permanent damage to the function or structure of the body, and need of medical intervention to prevent permanent damage. China's cybersecurity and personal information protection framework continues to develop, and the area rapidly changing from regulatory perspective. Numerous potential important future changes on the horizon. The key relevant regulation is the Chinese Cybersecurity Act that came into effect on June 1st of 2017 and was implemented with respect to medical device registration by a technical guideline in 2018. There is a revised guideline recently issued in September 2020 to further strengthen the regulations. In particular, the cybersecurity protection of qualified devices should meet the following requirements among the others. So the privacy, which is the data can only be retrieved by authorized users within an authorized period by authorized means. Integrity, which is the data must be accurately and comprehensively and may not be altered without permission. The availability, the data that can only be accessed by authorized users and cannot be altered without permission to ensure its accuracy and must be accessible and usable. The cybersecurity law has a data localization requirement so that critical data must be stored within China and not transmitted outside of China unless a security assessment is passed. Network operators, which would include hospitals, have specific obligations to monitor data leakage and loss of information. They also must seek consent for data collection of personal information. In particular, genetic information is seen as highly sensitive and must not be held by non-Chinese companies. Network software will require an additional self-assessment risk report regarding cybersecurity risk in the NMPA application.
There is a procedure for software lifecycle challenges, but I think we are running a little bit out of time. So please refer to the slides once you have received them. And we go to the next.
There have been quite a number of recent guidance documents about SAMD and SIMD, as this slide shows. We don't have time to go into the detail, but I think this list helps to give a sense of the seriousness with which the NMPA is addressing the difficulties of regulating such products and the speed with which it is evolving its thinking and scrutiny. We also have customers and increasing requests related to robotic products, especially surgical navigation devices. And here is a snapshot of key regulations for preparing for your NMPA registration application, as well as recent changes. The oral implant surgical navigation guideline was issued only in September and adds further clarity for the growing number of dental medical devices that are imported to China. Robotic devices in China are classified as those which track, act, or plan treatment or trajectory during surgery. Key guidelines and standards to follow include that on laser product safety and other active device guidelines.
Naturally, manufacturers wonder if there's a faster way for their product to gain access to the Chinese market. On this slide, we will show you that there are 3 alternative and fast-track pathways. But the message we would like to leave with you is that these are not realistic in practice for a vast majority of non-Chinese manufacturers. The 3 fast-track or green channel, as they are sometimes called, are the innovation approval, the priority review, or the emergency approval. They have been established by NMPA to encourage innovation and deal with unmet medical needs. In one of the 3 fast-track statuses, it's granted, which does not mean that the devices have not been approved by NMPA, but put into accelerated review process. The device will be allocated front of queue priority throughout the registration process, but still needs to go through normal registration. Meanwhile, especially assigned NMPA officer would check in and provide guidance throughout the expedited process.
There are also 2 primary alternative pathways to entering in the Chinese market at present. The first is the Hainan Bo-Li-Cheng Medical Tourism Pilot Zone, which has seen a flurry of publicity recently as part of a government-approved push to keep the medical tourism within China, including the presentations and webinars. The pilot zone consists of a number of Chinese and foreign cooperative medical institutions within a roughly 20 square kilometers area on Hainan Island, a large island off China's south coast and the most southern province in China. Once a product is approved for use within the pilot zone, the product can, with the consent of the Hainan MPA and the NMPA, collect real-world data on Chinese nationals, which can then be used as supplementary evidence for an NMPA registration that would enable China-wide sales. Hospitals within the pilot zone are closely involved in the process and would need to submit the import application to the Hainan MPA. In parallel, the manufacturer applies to NMPA for real-world data approvals. There are 2 focus areas for NMPA with respect to such applications. The products should be urgently needed for clinical use, and there should be no products of the same variety in China. Manufacturers can sell their products in China's Greater Bay Area without having been approved by NMPA. It is perhaps more exciting than the Hainan because the Greater Bay Area has a population of nearly 80 million people, which is close to the size of Germany. The implementation process has steadily moved forward since first being announced in 2019 and has recently gathered more momentum. Once the policy is finally adopted, which is expected next year, manufacturers can consider the voluntary listing in Hong Kong as a crucial entrance point to an important part of China and as a precursor to China-wide registration with the NMPA. In other words, this means that innovative products such as digital health technologies would have an advantage in entering the Greater Bay Area if already listed or sold in Hong Kong.
For most of you, the important question is the costs. let's see about the costs. Official submission fees for NMPA approval for imported medical devices are around $33,000 for class 2 products and $48,000 for class 3 products. For class 1, there is no filing fee. But there are significant other costs on top: local testing fees, custom fees, transportation fee, and document drafting. In terms of ballpark figures for total costs from start to finish, in our experience, class 1 device filing costs between $7,000 and $12,000. Class 2 registrations are likely to cost an additional $50,000 on top of the filing fee. And class 3 registrations will likely cost an additional $80,000 to $100,000 on top of the filing fee. This all assumes no clinical trials are necessary. When speaking with a service provider, you must always ensure to ask for a full cost calculation that covers everything, so you don't have unexpected costs at the end of the day. To recap briefly, first we discussed the broader digital health landscape and some of the implications for regulatory professionals as the regulations evolve to accommodate fast developing technology. We talked about the NMPA as a health regulator in China for medical products and digital products in particular. We also mentioned the importance of choosing your NMPA legal agent. Then we explained the qualification and classification process for digital health products and medical devices more broadly, and how these determine the regulatory pathway for your product approval in China. And we discussed some specific product life cycle changes on software products.
To finish, we looked at some alternative, potentially faster registration pathways, including the Hainan Pilot Zone and Hong Kong Greater Bay Area. And we provided some specific recent regulatory updates for digital health software and recent software product registrations. As medical device manufacturers, you may be asking, so what are the implications of the information that we covered today? Or why is it important to me? The implications are that no matter what product or risk class your medical devices fall into, it all starts with your regulatory pathway. It is your foundation step to entering the rapidly growing digital healthcare market in China. The regulatory process must be done accurately and efficiently with the goal of accelerating your product's time to market. Any missteps in the process will most likely result in multiple and possibly recurring issues, resulting in loss of time and finances. Therefore, who you choose to lead you through the regulatory pathway will be crucial to an efficient registration process. This is where Cassima will be of immense value to your success in China's healthcare market. By drawing on our vast experience, Cassima provides you a complete end-to-end solution, ensuring an accurate and clear pathway to NMPA registration for our clients.
And now we arrived at the last slide. Here you can see our worldwide office locations, and one of these will be on your continent or even nearby. Don't hesitate contacting us or visit our website and subscribe for our monthly newsletter. We hope you enjoyed our presentation and look forward to connecting further. Thank you very much so far, and now to your questions.
Thank you, Marcus and Jackie, again for your very interesting presentation. If we stay on this slide for a little bit, at the SME Centre, we work with field experts, of which, of course, we value our service providers, Cassima, as well of your services and expertise. So again, I would also recommend our participants of today's session to contact Cassima if you have further questions, especially on the registration process. And of course, the presentation is also very complementary to the market study that the SME Centre we have recently produced together with our partner CBBC. Can we please now move on to the Q&A session? And Marcus, if you could stop. Yeah, thank you. I would start with this question that we received from the participants. from Mr. Hans van Dijk. What is the effects of the Made in China policy? I suppose it's Made in China 2025. So according to Hans, in my 10 years experience in rehabilitation in China, is more and more difficult since hospitals and rehabilitation centers today can only import devices that are not available in China. European companies starting to export parts instead of the complete products to transform the devices into Made in China. Their expectations is the Chinese manufacturers will produce themselves in the near future. Marcus, Jackie, Corey, feel free to take this question.
Yes, that's true that China 2025 is the first 10 years action program for the Chinese government to implement the manufacturing power strategy to upgrade Chinese industry continually. This has an influence on the individual overseas manufacturer directly. The current situation is that the demand for high-end devices and IVDs, which are primarily imported, is growing fast. So I would say there's a strong position for importers of high-end materials, but we also offer as a standard solution the smooth transfer from importing to manufacturing in China with different pathways.
Thank you, Marcus. Jackie, do you have anything to add? Corey, Wendy as well?
No.
If not, since we, again, I would recommend our participants feel free to comment or share any questions you might have. In the meantime, maybe I could also address some questions from our end, especially to Marcus and Jackie. Since a large part of your presentation were focusing on NMPA registration, what do you think in detail is the role of China NMPA legal agents, either with its own subsidiaries, distributors, or consultancy firms? And what information and documents should companies prepare for the NMPA registration? And eventually, in the latter part of your presentation, you presented about alternatives, including the Hainan or Greater Bay Area. Can companies bypass the time and cost registration process through using the Hainan or Greater Bay Area? This is a first question that I have.
Liam, this was not only the first question, it was a dozen of questions. So let's start with an NMPA legal agent. In 2014, there was a first law or regulation regarding the NMPA, the role of the NMPA legal agent. And it was a quite simple one. In 2016 and 17, another 2 or 3 regulations came up. But only in 2020, more than 10 new regulations on the role of the NMPA legal agent came into force, with more focus on post-market surveillance. And this shows how important the choice of your NMPA legal agent is, because he or she is representing your company in China. Regarding the fast track ways in Hainan and Greater Bay Area. So to our experience, Hainan is nice in the communication and in media, but we haven't seen a successful or many successful registrations in Hainan. Greater Bay Area is easier entrance via Hong Kong. As in Hong Kong, you have only to do a listing at the MDAX, and you will find relatively fast a partner importing from Hong Kong with Hong Kong companies into the Greater Bay Area, where you have around 80 million people living. Okay, other questions?
Yeah, thank you, Marcus. We do have 2 questions. from the audience. A follow-up question again from Mr. Hans van Dijk. Finally, in making strategic decisions to enter the Chinese market, can we say that geopolitics gradually are playing a bigger role? Anybody from our panelists? If not, maybe.
Well, I think the geopolitical or the relations between China, the EU, and US are in a move at these days. We do not do politics. We do business consultancy and registration of medical devices in China. So as medical devices from abroad are still ahead in development, at least 10 to 15 years, I think there will be no significant change for imported medical devices. They will be needed in China.
Yeah, thank you. And if I may add one comment from my end, because of the global pandemic issues and zooming at China, in March this year, the government's 14th five-year plan, which is the core development plan for the Chinese government strategy, was published. But that during that 14th five-year plan, it also has put forward a very detailed plan for the development of the healthcare and life sciences industries. Of course, when it comes to geopolitical issues, the policies for trade, for import and export has always been impacted the most. Studying or further investigating the indications from the Chinese 14th five-year plan eventually might also give more directions. And I think if that also helps to answer your question, Hans. There's another question from our audience. The question is, as a European manufacturer, we find more and more challenging regarding registering new medical products with China. Is this to do with the stricter inspection that CISEMA just mentioned?
Well, as I mentioned before, the regulations are changing very, very fast, and it's it needs to be updated on regularly basis following the regulations. Also, during a 2 years registration procedure, regulations might change, and you have adopt your registration file to it. We also mentioned that there will be in future factory inspections or audits abroad. We have already prepared one German manufacturer for this audit, but this is not a daily routine now for European medical device manufacturers to be audited by a Chinese NMPA team.
Thank you, Marcus. Thank you again. I think we are running out of time, but before we go, I would like to ask again, maybe for one last question from our audience. In the meantime, I thank everybody, all the participants, for staying with us. I think the vast majority of our participants stayed through all the presentations, so thank you again. And please, we kindly ask you to scan the QR code on the slide to share your feedback. This will help us to constantly improve our delivery of services. So please take your time. Only takes you a few minutes and fill in this feedback form. I do not think we have more questions from the audience. I would like to maybe give all the speakers, including, of course, Corey and Wendy, one last round of closing remarks, or as a takeaway that you would like to address to the audiences. Marcus?
Yes, so I would encourage all European manufacturers, if they have questions regarding their registration of their products, contacting me as a first landing point in Munich, and with a quick overview or review of your instruction for use, we can easily provide first calculation for your registration, and of course any questions will be answered immediately, either by email or by phone. So and we have the big advantage that we cover 2 time zones, so we are nearly working 16 hours per day in China, Hong Kong, and Munich. So happy to meet you.
Jackie?
Yeah, this is a great opportunity. I focus on supporting Hong Kong and Taiwan clients. So if there are any participants that are from this market, then yeah, feel free to contact me, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you again, Jackie and Marcus. Wendy and Corey, maybe you have anything to share before we close, and if I missed anything before
Thank you,
finish today.
Yeah, I think that's
Yes.
a good opportunity to share the market information as well as registration related information with all you here. If you have any question with regards to the report or any interest in market research, partner identification, or general information inquiry, just feel free to drop us email, and happy to help you. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you again. I think that we are coming to an end of today's session. I thank, of course, all our speakers as well as our participants. The report is available on the SME Centre website for downloading. And again, if you're a SME Centre, if you are EU SME, you're very welcome to investigate further on our services that we could provide to you for understanding better the markets here in China. I wish you all a very good day and evening. Please stay in touch with us at the SME Centre and China Business Council. This is the end of today's session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day. Have a nice evening. Goodbye.